Hi, and welcome to Bloody Good Reads. I'm your host, Mark Goddard, and we've got something a little bit different than our usual kind of crime thriller or horror on the podcast. We're going for a bit of dystopian future, some speculative fiction. This week's guest is an author and journalist whose brand new book, Beautiful Shining People, is out now through our good friends over at Arenda Book. So, welcome to the podcast this week, Michael Grothaus.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
All right. So, what we like to do here on Bloody Good Reads is force authors to pick 3 books that they love, because I'm a bit of a bastard like that. But before we get to that point, and before we get into kind of your brand new book and your previous book, just all I'd like to ask you, like I like every guest, although yours is a little bit different because there's no particular genre pinned down for you. So, how did you get into writing and reading in general? What was your reading growing up? And yeah, we'll start from there.
Reading growing up, I actually read comic books growing up when I was probably till about 15, and I didn't start reading novels until I was probably around 18. And I think one of the first novels I remember reading was The Godfather. And another early novel I remember reading was Shibumi by Trevanian. If you haven't read it, it's an excellent spy thriller. Just amazing. But from there, I kind of got into the classics, and now I'm kind of more into contemporary. And I try to read a book every week.
So, when did the kind of journalism part come in? Because usually, when you speak to a lot of authors who've gone into journalism before, they're quite kind of into fiction generally. They've read quite a lot. If you're starting off with comic books, when did the love of journalism come into it? Was it
Yeah,
more in the later years?
Yeah, so that's a good question because when I got my bachelor's degree, I went to my 4-year undergraduate degree. I went to film school. Because from comic books, obviously, I grew up in the '90s, and the two biggest mediums for young people back then were comic books and movies. Today it's probably TikTok and whatever. I don't know what else. I'm too old now.
Not a feeling.
So I went to film school, and because I knew I wanted to tell stories some way. So I thought, all right, film is going to be the coolest medium to do it in. But I really got frustrated because in film school, you cannot make a movie on your own. It requires a team of people, and what your script kind of gets taken away from you, and it's got to go through a budgetary committee, and it's like if you want it to rain in one scene, that's a whole new conversation with the budgetary committee. And I just didn't like the committee like aspect of film school. So when I graduated, I knew I didn't want to go into film anymore, but I didn't know what else to do. So I went into the tech industry for a while because I was really interested in tech. And then after I left the tech industry, I'm like, well, look, I like writing. I know a lot about technology. Why don't I try to become a technology journalist? And that way I could tell stories, even though they're real life stories, they're not fiction. But I could tell stories about the technology, all this new technology springing up around us, and that's kind of a long roundabout way how I got into being a journalist.
Okay, because you've written for some very big kind of named magazines and newspapers, Guardian in the UK, Sunday Telegraph, Vice. So you've had some big names there to kind of put your journalism into. So that's also quite good.
Yeah, it's always nice when the big guys will publish you.
Cool. So where did the idea of your first novel come about? When did you kind of want to start writing Epiphany Jones? It's quite a heavy subject, to be honest
Yeah,
with you. And
yeah,
longlisted for the CWA and New Blood Dagger Award. So, it's very crime. I'm assuming.
yeah. So Epiphany Jones, it kind of blends genre, but crime, thriller, obviously. And just so your listeners, if they've never heard of Epiphany Jones, it's about a porn addict who meets kind of a mysterious woman who says she hears voices from God, and she kind of forces this guy to go with her on her journey to get revenge on the Hollywood elite. And ultimately, the story is about sex trafficking in Hollywood. And I kind of, and it's a dark comedy. It really, is kind of a fuck you to Hollywood, and it makes fun of famous people. It makes fun of the industry. Um, but I got into that, I think, because of my experience in film school, and I had an internship with a big Hollywood studio, and I was on the festival circuit for that internship, and I just saw the absurdity of Hollywood. And I'm just like, I need some way to make fun of this, and now I just need a story so I can do that. So I decided to let's talk about sex trafficking in Hollywood, which does happen, but let's do it in a way. And sex trafficking is a very real thing that goes on every day. It is horrible. But so it's hard for the reader to digest that. So that's why I kind of made the book a black comedy, although it is very serious, obviously, when it comes to sex trafficking. But that's kind of how Epiphany Jones came about, through my experience in Hollywood and kind of wanting to just take the whole movie industry down a few notches.
Okay. So it's quite a good next step then from kind of wanting to create movies, because I know a lot of people who started out in screenwriting have gone, I wanted to kind of express more detail, more of myself into my work, and have gone into novel writing. Was this kind of a similar thing for yourself, or?
Absolutely, and especially as I've gotten older, with novels, I think it's the perfect medium to really, well, as you just said, express yourself, and you can do that much more in a novel than you can in a film script. Because a film script is basically just dialogue, which the director might change on set or whatever. But with a novel, it is it's your baby, it's your work. You have control over every line. The publisher might try to edit something, but if you talk to my publisher, they know I'm very particular, and my publisher for my books, Arenda, have been great. Any edits they've helped me make, I've agreed with, and it's made the book better. But definitely with a novel, you just have more control over it, so it is more part of your essence, I would say, who you are, and that's much more satisfying from a creative standpoint.
Okay, cool. Okay, so before we get into your second book, which is your non-fiction book as well, what we like to do here in the podcast is force authors to pick 3 books they love.
Yeah.
So, what is your first bloody good read you brought along today?
Okay, so I just want to give a heads up. My 3 books are wildly different.
That's fine. That's what we like here.
So one of my favorite books, and I think people would be surprised if they heard me say this, people that know me, but have you ever read World War Z?
I have read most of it.
Okay. I don't know if you like it. I love it. As a journalist, I love it. And if your listeners haven't read World War Z, it's nothing like the Brad Pitt movie.
No, it's much better than the Brad Pitt movie.
It's so much better than the Brad Pitt movie. It's basically, there was a zombie apocalypse, and this guy, it's his job to go around and collect stories after the apocalypse has ended, stories from people who battled the zombies during the apocalypse. And each chapter is basically a different short story, and detailing very much like a documentary the lives of the people during the zombie apocalypse. And as a journalist, I love it, and just as a fiction writer, I love it. I think it is so creative. It is one of my favorite books. And what's frustrating is so many people know World War Z from the movie, and the movie was horrible, and the book is amazing.
Yeah, the film was not a very good film, I admit, and nothing like the book, which is a very strange way of adapting a book, really, to make a film not like the book.
Well, that's Hollywood, man. That's what happens. That's
yeah. Awesome. Good pick. Not been picked before, so I like that.
Really?
And
okay.
horror, so even better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So, going on from Epiphany Jones, so was Trust No One kind of your second one writing, or was it something you wrote before Epiphany Jones, or was this your second book?
So my second book, Trust No One, is actually nonfiction. So that was me with my my journalism hat on. And in Epiphany Jones, a subplot is this: the protagonist, as I said, he's a porn addict, but he likes a specific type of porn, which is faked Photoshop porn, where a celebrity's face has been pasted onto a porn star's body, and that's his drug, that's his
Mm.
addiction. And when I wrote Epiphany Jones, that was very much a real subculture of these talented Photoshop artists making whoever Lucy Liu look like she's having sex, and they do it in Photoshop. And then after Epiphany Jones came out, around 2017, and I'm sure your listeners might be familiar with deepfakes, but that's
Mm.
AI, that lets you can manipulate the AI to make it look like anybody is doing anything in a video. And one of the first applications of deepfakes in these online subcultures were to create fake celebrity porn. And because I had researched that subculture so much for Epiphany Jones, when deepfakes, the technology came out, um, uh, a publisher approached me to write a nonfiction book about deepfakes and the threat they pose. And because of again, my history writing Epiphany Jones and my career as a technology journalist, it was kind of a perfect melding of subjects for me. But that was a nonfiction book, but I'm very proud of that book,
Mm.
and it goes to show just how radically AI is going to alter things in the future for us.
So, because AI has been, it's very a lot, especially in the art kind of area now. It's very controversial.
Yes,
A lot of people using AI to kind of create work instead of actually doing to do the work themselves. So it's quite poignant still. The whole deep fake and AI. So no, if people are interested in that and want to kind of look into that, that's quite a good book to go and check out. Um, the world of deep fakes is a scary one.
absolutely, absolutely.
Cool. So your brand new book has come out already now, so is out now, which is strange for us. Normally, we're way ahead of time. But Beautiful Shining People. There's not a really a particular genre for this one. It's kind of a tap bit of sci-fi, some dystopian future. Before we recorded, he said he described it a bit more like it's speculative fiction.
Mhm.
Um, how would you describe this book yourself? For people who might not have heard the book yet, please give us a little bit about the book and where the inspiration came
I think if I could, condense the book down into a couple sentences,
from.
it is a coming of age story about someone who feels like an outsider. A young man, a 17-year-old boy called John. Um, and he is kind of a tech prodigy, a tech genius, and he's flown to Japan by Sony because Sony wants to buy an algorithm he's written. And John has um, deeply held secrets and fears about his body that make him feel like an outsider. And he ends up meeting two people in Japan in kind of a really strange cafe. Uh, the girl's name is Nyatnya. She's about 20. And she's obviously Japanese. And then the cafe owner, he's a former sumo wrestler named Gudo. But the book is really about feeling like an outsider and exploring how technology in the future is going to uh, be be responsible for some very wonderful things in our lives and some very horrible things in our lives. And I could explain why Japan and my reasons behind it if you want me to go into it. But
Yeah, sure.
yeah, so look, so I've spent a lot of time in Japan, and one time I was there, I was in Kyoto, and it was about, I don't know, 2 in the morning. And I want to preface this by saying, Mark, that I don't do drugs and I don't drink. Um,
Fair dues.
so but that being said, it was about 2 in the morning, and I'm hiking through the hills of Kyoto. I don't know if you've ever been in Kyoto, but it's
Sadly
surrounded by,
not.
it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And I was hiking through the hills at like about 2 a.m. and I hear something, a twig snap behind me, and a rustling in the leaves on the forest floor, and I turn around, and I don't know how to describe it really. It was about a 3 foot tall, glowing shadow that kind of looked like a stick figure. It
Okay.
was kind of orangish and glowing, and it stared at me for about 30 seconds, and I stared at it, and then it literally climbed a tree and went out of sight. Um, and and then I went about my walk, and the next day I went around to a lot of shrines in the area, and I found out about this belief system called Shintoism. It's a really old religion, and they believe in these things called kami. And kami, in the West, they're translated as like gods, but in the East, a kami is more like a spirit, like an invisible creature we can't see. And Beautiful Shining People, it definitely deals with artificial intelligence and the impact of the weaponization of artificial intelligence in the future. But it also has a very spiritual side to the book that involve kami, and that experience in Tokyo led me to create this element of the Beautiful Shining People story, and then another element that's really relevant to especially AI and the weaponization of it we're seeing today. I was in Hiroshima one time, and as a journalist, I've been all over the world, and I've talked to victims of truly horrible crimes like sex trafficking, and um, as a journalist, you learn to compartmentalize. You learn to take yourself out of the your emotions out of the equation. When I was in Hiroshima, I went into the Peace Memorial Museum, that is all about the bombing, and I saw these horrible images that we generally don't see in the West about, what happened to the children that were affected by the bomb, and what happened to old men who, when somebody helped them from out of the rubble, their skin literally slid off their bones like chicken meat off. When you take a wing from a barbecue grill, and I was going through the museum, and you learn all about the making of the bomb and these brilliant, brilliant scientists, that were able to create this, the most technologically advanced thing of the day. And when I got out of the Peace Memorial Museum, it was a beautiful autumn day. You couldn't ask for more beautiful autumn day. But I just looked around and I saw all these 7 and 8-year-old Japanese kids. They were there on school trips in the Peace Park, learning about their history, learning about this horrible history. And if you looked at me, I'm a 6'1" big bearded guy. I look like a pretty tough guy. And like I said, I've heard all kinds of horrible stories, seen all kinds of horrible stuff throughout my life. But for some reason, I just started bawling, like crying in the middle of the park, and over what happened, to these kids because of this technological device. And after the experience in Kyoto and after the experience in Hiroshima, I knew I needed to write Beautiful Shining People, and the latter part of the book really does deal with what happened in Hiroshima and how technology is constantly weaponized against people by countries so they can hold on to power.
These experiences they haunt you, don't they? When you go into places like this, because over kind of in the UK, we don't really get that much in the way of kind of museums that show too much of the violence that happened. I mean, I'm part Polish, so I've been over to Poland. I've gone to the camps there, and you go in there and it changes you in a little way to see kind of exactly
Absolutely.
how it is, like seeing
Absolutely.
kids' shoes, and yeah,
And you're talking about Auschwitz, right?
yeah,
There's a room in Auschwitz where you see all the shoes
yeah, little
piled
shoes
up.
inside the thing. It's horrid. It's
It,
absolutely
it,
horrid.
it's horrible. And in the West, we learn about these incidents. Obviously, we learn about the Holocaust, but being where it happened, something washes over you.
Especially
You
when
know,
you get into, say, like the gas chambers, and
absolutely,
yeah, that feeling comes over you of complete shock, and yeah,
absolutely, and it grounds you too because
mm,
I remember being in Auschwitz, and you see photos of concentration camp prisoners, and they're all naked and they're all skinny, and I mean, they're not just skinny. Their skin is hanging off because they're so malnourished, and you look at these people, and it might be one of the people might be a rich banker, the other one might be a petty criminal that lived on the streets all of his life, the other one might be a trash man, but underneath it all, we are all just the same. And that, and you see these concentration camp, victims standing naked next to each other. And it really hits home. It makes you realize that we are all just the same, and what could happen, to them could easily happen to us, or we could do the same thing to other people, that the Nazis did to them, if we lose sight of who we are and how we are all related to each other.
Mm. Jumping how we go from here now.
Yeah, bring down the house, I guess.
So going back to the book. What I love about the book is it's not too far into the future, but it doesn't feel like now. You've got some amazing kind of set pieces, like small bits, like the magazine that kind of you can change the language on a magazine and that kind of thing, but you still have your usual kind of everyday streets with your own little supermarkets and people on their bikes just riding down the street. It's a nice mixture of kind of modern and sci-fi. It's not really sci-fi. It's not really modern. It's a kind of cross section of different genres. I love the feel of it, and I'm not a huge sci-fi fan, so
and I'm not
going into that.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I am not a huge sci-fi fan either, and I don't want people to pick up Beautiful Shining people thinking it's going to be spaceships and ray guns and everything like that. It's not. It does take place in the mid 2040s. And, in my mind, because, I was born in the 70s, the 2040s really seems far away. But, I mean, come on, it's 2023 already. That's only 2 decades away, right? Mm-hmm. So I knew, telling this story, a lot of things we have 20 years from now are going to be, we're going to have bicycles. We're going to have convenience stores. And a lot of it's going to be the same, but there will be little pieces of technology in our life that will kind of almost feel like magic, or at least feel, quote unquote, futuristic. And so, because Beautiful Shining People is only set 20 years in the future, I really wanted to, almost as if I was a journalist writing this, I really wanted to just try to represent the future 20 years from now as it actually will be in the book. And that's why you see all those elements, like you said, somebody riding a bike down an alley, things like that are immediately noticeable to the real world today. And then you have these magazines where you can change the language in the magazine, or things like that. So that's that.
In a way, I don't know if this is the right thing to say about it, but in a way, a little bit like how anime sometimes is. It's not futuristic, not too modern, but it has that futuristic element, like touch to it, kind of like Japanese style. So yeah, it's good. I'm really enjoying it so far. It's shocked
That's
me.
great.
I don't know if you're a fan of sci-fi. So.
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. So let's go on to your second pick. So what is your second bloody good read you brought on today?
All right, this is totally different than World War Z. It's Memoirs of a Geisha.
Brilliant book. It's one of my favorites, that one.
I'm so glad you said that. I love Memoirs of a Geisha. It is the only book I've actually dreamt about when I've read it. So I've been, when I read it, I'd go to bed that night and I'd actually dream about the story. I mean, that's how good the book is. And again, to your listeners, if they haven't read Memoirs of a Geisha, but they've seen the movie's horrible. That's a comment.
Awful.
Yeah, the movie's horrible. But Memoirs of a Geisha, you feel like you were walking the streets of Kyoto, in 1930s and 1940s. Everything he describes, it's so visceral, but it's so beautiful too. And it's a shame, I think, that he only wrote that one book. And I don't know why. Some people say, "Oh, you only have one real book in you," but or maybe he just got so rich off of that, he's like, "I'm retiring." But it's a shame he did not write more books. But Memoirs of Geisha is one of my favorite books. And again, some people classify it's obviously historical, um, and it's I would call it romantic fiction. I am not a kind of guy that reads romance books, and I'm not a kind of guy that reads historical books. But I loved it. And
Mhm.
Arthur Golden, is the author, and like I said, it's a shame he never wrote another book after that.
Highly
I'm
recommend
so
it.
glad you liked it, though. I'm so
Yeah,
glad you liked it.
I first started working in Waterstones when I was, God, 17. And I wanted to try
Okay.
new things. I wanted to try new fiction, and it's one of the ones that I could have been. I'm going to grab it off the shelf and give it a go, and I couldn't put it down. It was absolutely
Yeah,
changed my way of reading.
really,
Non horror
absolutely.
wise, non horror wise, there's a lot more that's completely messed up my horror reading. But general fiction, absolutely loved this. Absolutely loved it. It kind of drags you in. It's one of the ones that I'm a slow reader. Didn't take me too long to
Yep.
finish. Um, but yeah, like you said, the movie unfortunately was a disappointment. but most movie adaptations are. So.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember at the time, but there was so much controversy about the movie too because
Mm,
Zhang Ziyi, who is an amazing actress, but she's Chinese, and she played the main geisha character, and uh, a lot of people in Japan were offended by that because obviously there's a lot of history of conflict between those two countries, but just a wonderful book. Bad movie, great cinematography in the movie is amazing,
mm.
but the way they tell the story is horrible.
Awesome pick. One of my top 5 books of all time now as well. So I'm
Oh, that's
happy to
great.
have that in.
Oh,
Brilliant
man,
pick.
I'm so.
Awesome. So, what are you working on next? So, obviously, you're going through the promo and the PR for the brand new book, but is there anything else coming up for you?
Yeah. So I'm working on my next novel. Will be kind of a strange one. It's about intersubjective constructs, and that's just a fancy term for the social constructs. We all abide by. Like, so, an social construct is something like marriage, or a country is a social construct, or things like that. Religion, God is a social construct. Um, it's dealing what would happen if some of those social constructs would disappear from the world. Um, and I know that sounds really weird. I'm really bad at talking about future books, just because I do think, as a writer, I do think if you try to explain a book you're working on, it takes a lot of the creative energy out of it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of let that out into the world. But I will say, for Beautiful Shining People, um, I don't want to give anything away, but it might be the first book of a series of 7 books.
Okay.
Uh, and so those would also be future books. The idea, and again, for your listeners, if they haven't read Beautiful Shining People yet, um, again, it takes place about 20 years from now. But the idea for the series is the actual series would span 60 years with some of these characters. And you see how, the world changes over the course of a lifetime.
Mm.
And one thing, about seeing how the world changes, as I get older, you know, I do feel, I am starting to feel left behind a little bit by new technology, and that's weird because I'm a technology journalist. But when I look at an app,
Mm.
but when I look at an app like TikTok, I'm like, what is this? Like, how do you
Yeah.
use this? And to me, that's confusing. But to a 15-year-old kid, it's second nature. And if I could just talk briefly about technology for a second,
Yeah, sure.
you know, I don't think I don't think people understand, in the next 20 years, in the next 30, in the next 40, in the next 50, technology primarily driven by AI is going to advance so much. Things are literally going to feel like fucking magic. And it is going, in the health sector, it is going to bring so many benefits to us. But in the political sector, in the war industry, it's going to bring very bad things for us. And also, it is radically going to reshape society, because so many jobs are going to be lost by AI in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And And as far as these changes, these wonderful magical technology things we might have 20 years from now, what I'll explain it like is this. If you took somebody from the year 1900 and you plopped them into the year 1950, they would be pretty amazed, right? Because they would look up in the sky and see a metal bird, because they didn't have that plane in the year 1900. And they'd see a TV and be like, holy hell, what is that? Because they didn't have TVs in 1900, right? And same with, they were beginning to get phones, but TVs, things like that, airplanes, they would see the atomic bomb and just freak out, because how could one missile, one cannonball, they would probably call it, release that much energy? But then if you took somebody from the year 1950 and brought them to the year 2000, they wouldn't freak out that much. They would know, okay, that's a fancier plane. This is a fancier TV, but going forward from 2023 to 2045, it is going to be like the advances are going to be so great. It would be like plucking somebody from the year 1700 and bringing them to the year 2000. People are going to freak out over some of these advancements, and these advancements are going to affect society so much. And I think some people, especially older people, and I include myself in that, might not be able to handle that too well. And so, and it's only going to accelerate as time goes on. And so, with the Beautiful Shining People, if it is a series, my intent is just to show how radically life is going to change over the next 70 years.
Awesome. And if it's 7 books as well, spread over that many years, it's going to be quite a lot of story for the characters going forward as well. And like I said, I mean, I'm an 80s child, so even today's stuff, I sometimes just go, I've missed a couple of years, and I don't know what's going on anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I'm a technology journalist, and sometimes I'm just like, wait, we can do what now? And I don't know if you've even seen like videos. Like now we have like text to video generators where you can just type in, dog kicking a football, and it'll generate the video of it for you. And
Crazy.
it's crazy, and it's magic, and it's awe inspiring, but also it's going to put a lot of people out of work too. And
hence all the controversy with the art as well. I mean,
absolutely,
yeah, and novel writing as well. It's hard, especially in the kind of the self-publishing sector, because people are starting to say, well, you haven't written that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is going to be crazy, for the creative, the creative industries. It's going to reduce jobs a lot, and eventually, if I want to read a new novel, if I'm not speaking as a novelist, I'm speaking as a reader. If AI could just generate a novel for me at will, well, why shouldn't I read that novel that the AI just made specifically for me, instead of buying a novel a novelist wrote? And those are going to be questions we as a society are going to have to deal with, and obviously readers going to have to deal with. But I think in about 10 years, we're just going to be able to generate any kind of personalized entertainment we want. And as a novelist, I guess I'm out of a job. I don't know what happens after then.
No, it's a strange world we're walking into. It really is. But,
yeah.
Awesome. So I have to ask you, what is your third and final bloody good read?
Okay. Steppenwolf. Do you know the novel?
I do.
Okay. Do you like it? Some people hate it.
I've never read it.
Okay. So for your listeners, Steppenwolf, if you haven't heard of it, it's a novel by Hermann Hesse. He was a German and a Swiss author. He won the Nobel Prize, and Nobel Prize in literature you don't get for specific work; you get it for a body of work. But Steppenwolf is probably his most famous book. And another famous book is like The Glass Bead Game. But Steppenwolf I love because it is a very realistic novel. It's about this guy who's just kind of bumming around the city. He's very depressed. He's thinking about suicide. And then he meets this weird girl, and she takes him to this theater of the absurd, and it's kind of almost like a parallel world that he didn't know existed. And I love those stories where they have kind of a mystical side to it, but they're very grounded in our actual reality.
Mm.
And I just love the duality of the story. Like this guy is taken to this magic theater, that exists, that's normally invisible to everybody. And I love Steppenwolf. It's a brilliant novel, and Herman Hesse, who wrote the book. I mean, like I said, this is a guy who eventually won the Nobel Prize in Literature. He's generally considered one of the 20th century's greatest novelists now. Although I think a lot of people probably don't read his work this day and age, though they should.
3 really good picks. And it's not Stephen King. Hooray. Ongoing joke in this podcast.
A lot of people say Stephen King.
They do.
Okay.
I have said I'm going to ban his work on it, but yeah, awesome. 3 really good picks, and one of my all-time favorites as well. So it's always good to have one of those on the list. So finally, that is on the list, and I am very happy by that. Awesome. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been really lovely talking to you. Go and check out Beautiful Shining People, and also Michael's previous work as well. You won't regret it. It's a if you're not into sci-fi, don't think of it as sci-fi. Just go into it as a more dystopian future. You'll absolutely love it. So go and check it out now. It's out now from a render. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it from Waterstones or whatever bookshops you have in the American side of it. I'm not too sure what you got over there. So where can people find you if you'd like to be found?
Yeah, so people can find me on basically Twitter is the only social media I'm on. I'm not that big of a social media guy, but I'm on Twitter at Michael Grothaus. That's my handle, at Michael Grothaus. So it's Michael Grothaus. Follow me, say hi. If you read the books, any of my books, definitely let me know what you think, because I do like interacting with readers on there. So you can find me on Twitter, and I've got my own website, but it's a little more than a digital pamphlet. So look for me on Twitter.
Awesome. I'll put the handle into the description below, as always, and a link to the book as well. Again, a huge thank you to Michael for coming on the podcast this week. Again, check out the book. As always, a huge shout out as well to our sponsor, Unported Book Club. And we'll see if this works, because my words aren't coming out great tonight. They are the UK's best and greatest horror and thriller book box service, bringing the wonders of a haunted bookshop straight to your door each month. You've got 2 boxes. You've got the Full Guts box, which is a brand new book, possibly haunted second-hand book, and another indie title. You also get drinks, UK snacks, bookmarks, pins, sometimes even random things like a canvas bag, which I'm carrying around every day with me at the moment. It's an amazing little bag. You could also, if you just want books, which I don't blame you, if books are awesome, you've also got the Bare Bones box as well. You can go over to Abominable Book Club at cratejoy.com. That's the one. Description below. And you can use the code BloodyGoodReads at checkout to get 10% off your first box. Go check it out. It's my favourite thing each month. Some amazing titles and some amazing authors have come onto this podcast from that box as well. So go and check them out. You can also catch me over on Twitter at BloodyGoodReads, at Instagram at BloodyGoodReads, and over at the BloodyGoodReads page on Facebook. Also, catch us every month on the Bloody Good Screen podcast, where myself, Niall, Chloe, and Marcus review 2 films, usually horror, although this time around we're doing non-horror because it's Niall's birthday and he's begged me to do non-horror for one of the movies. But go and check that out, and also our side series with horror author Hunter Shea as well, where I'm doing B movies, and we've got some weird and wonderful things coming up. Calamity of Snakes is next, I believe. So go and check that out. Go and give us a like, subscribe over We Get Podcasts. And I've been your host, Michael, and I'll see you next time.